Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Sup, X. I was wondering if anyone wanted to tell stories of encounters that took place in the Deep South. I've only had 2 very mild encounters, but I'll start with them. Story 1. Be me, Alabamian, in a small town of 140 people. Worked part-time in an old-ass schoolhouse, which at the time of this story was used as a library. Built in the 1910 seconds or so. I had heard that the place was haunted years before I started working there. First day on the job, and I asked the other librarian if she's seen any spooky shit go down. She said that she hadn't seen anything, but had heard a raspy clicking noise coming from the vents. She described it as sound like a predator. So anyway, skip forward about a month or so, and I was walking with the other librarian, shooting the shit as we were the only ones in the entire building. We passed a bookshelf, when suddenly, about halfway down the aisle, 3 books in a metal bookend get launched off the shelf. We're both believers, but skeptical of what we saw. So we tried to replicate it. We did everything to try to get the books to fly the same way. The only way we could reproduce it was by me literally punching the books from the backside. A bit of explanation about the building is needed for this story. The central room was kept empty and consisted of a stage on one end and was simply bare wooden floor everywhere else. The room was used as the cafeteria and auditorium when the building was a school, and had connecting halls branching off of it leading to all of the other rooms in the building. The main room has weird acoustics, so that you could be screaming your lungs out on one end and someone on the other end couldn't even hear you. It was like the room itself could suck away all the sound as if it was some sort of void. Additionally, there were places in the room where I could have sworn the only thing that I could hear was my own pulse. The point of my rambling here is to say that the room didn't echo, as it was essentially a soundless void. Fast forward another month or 2, and I was in the library by myself. I was walking back from the bathroom, across the main room, when I heard footsteps behind me. The steps were mimicking my steps. For every step I took, I would hear the sound of another one behind me. As I said before, the room does not echo, so that was rather concerning. I turned around fully expecting to see a demon standing inches behind me, but I saw nothing. I decided to test it, so I took 3 steps forward and suddenly stopped. I heard 3 shuffling footsteps behind me. Shitbricks.exe. Convinced myself that I'm brave and turned around again to face whatever was behind me. Still nothing. Hurriedly walked my ass to my office and watched Netflix for the rest of my shift.
Be me, just out of the military. Bro, we'll call him Bill, works for State Forestry in Fire Lookout Tower. Pretty dope, basically a mini apartment. Even has the internet. Invites me to stay with him for a few days. Basically hang out. And play board games and video. Awesome view. Shows me how to work firefinder thing and call in a fire. I ask what weird shit he's seen. He's pretty solemn about this. And doesn't seem okay talking.
Come on, I'll tell you, man. But you can't freak out if you see this shit.
At this point, I'll change my perspective. He had more than one story. Story 1.
Watching out across the forest one day, pretty chill. Saw a structure. Not stairs. An actual structure of some sort, couldn't tell. People were around it. Hauled it in, gave coordinates. The game warden says he will investigate in the morning, too late in the day. They're discussing this via radio. Radio chatter interrupted, unfamiliar.
Disregard all. This conversation is over.
Comms cut off on radio, just use the phone. Call disconnected. Cell has no signal now, despite having perfect signal before. The structure is still there. Gets a phone call. It's my supervisor.
Bill, leave this one be. Don't talk about it. Don't log it. Drop it.
Confused, asking what the deal is.
Bill, you're not in trouble. Just forget seeing it. You'll be fine.
Bill complies, removes log entries. Phone rings again. Same voice as guy on radio that broke comms.
Listen to boss. He's taking care of you.
Bill says he understands and doesn't want trouble.
I will not have to call you again.
Night falls. I fall asleep. Next morning, I looked where the structure was. It's not there. The clearing it was in is gone. Nothing but trees, as if this never happened. Fast forward a few years. This structure pops up sometimes in different places. Out of nowhere, just there. It's different, but I can't tell what it is. I can't determine purpose, or even clear shape.
Bill finished the day's watch. Mild thunderstorm, but tower is safe. Chilled out, getting some video games. Power goes out suddenly. Bill looks to see if lightning strikes, sees nothing. Wait for it out. Hears clung 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 from steps. As if someone is climbing. No houses for miles. No vehicles seen approaching from the road. Bill grabs a flashlight and a rifle. Clung 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 stops.
Hey, it's bad weather. Let me in.
A voice says underneath the building.
This is state property. You cannot be here, sir. Leave or I'll call the sheriff.
Bill can't see anyone through the windows. It's pouring rain, thunder and lightning. Voice keeps calling.
Let me in. It's bad weather.
Voice is not panicked. States it as if it were just a simple calm request. He can't see anything, goes out with a rifle. Still repeating the same thing.
Let me in. It's bad weather.
I have a gun. The sheriff is coming. Leave.
Same phrase. Further down the steps, Bill can't see the source. Bill goes in, locks up, calls the sheriff. No more voices. Sheriff shows up, looks around. Weather calms down a lot. So both go down. Something stinks. Bill and the sheriff look in Bill's truck. Deer, bobcat, coyote, more than one, maybe 3 dead. Rotting animals just laying back there in a lot of mud. Sheriff says it might be someone pulling a sick joke. Drives around. Bill goes back up. Sheriff goes to Bill's truck. And then calls up.
Why did you move it? We need pictures, Bill.
Bill is confused. The animals had been removed from his truck. Bill calls the supervisor. Supervisor shows up and puts the hunting rifle and shotgun under the sofa compartment.
This stays here if it's needed.
Supervisor wouldn't speculate, but had zero doubts at all.
17 and bored as hell on summer vacation. This is a couple years after Hurricane Katrina. Decided to spend a week at my grandpa's place down in Louisiana. House is small and there's no air conditioning, but it's on the Pearl River. On my way out wearing my trunks when my grandpa stops me.
The hell do you think you're doing, boy?
I just want to swim, man.
You stay out of that water. Full of sewage and gators and God knows what else.
He's avoiding eye contact, staring down at his newspaper. Whatever you say. Drag a chair onto his thin wooden pier thing that goes onto the river. He doesn't even have a boat, but alright. Crack open the fantasy novel I'd been reading. Ambient river sounds plus warm Louisiana weather. Feels good man.png. Starts getting pretty hot after a couple hours. Peek past books in the cool water. Maybe just a quick dip. Put my foot over the side. Get a weird feeling, like I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. It's a bright, hot summer day, but something is really unsettling me. Scan the river. Heart skips a beat. See a dark shape dip below the surface. Relax, that was just a gator. No, it wasn't. It had hair. It was staring at me. Pull my foot up and freeze, watching the water for movement. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. Blood runs cold. Something is below me. Sounds like a woman trying to talk, but her mouth is full of water. See a shadow move in the water underneath the wooden slats. Fuck this. Pick up my book and head back to the house. Don't mention this to my grandpa. Avoid the river for the rest of the trip. Maybe it was a gator and I just had an overactive imagination, but I swear I saw long black hair, and the gurgles I heard underneath me sounded human. The area I was in was hit hard by Katrina, so maybe it was a spirit. Can spirits appear in the middle of the day? Either way, it was creepy as fuck.
Be around 11 or 12. I live in the deep south. Get home from school and walk down the long-ass driveway. Change into hunting clothes. Get to my hunting blind at about 4 p.m. It's getting late. I can barely see, sun setting. Getting bored and hungry, ready to head back home. Suddenly a wild deer approaches. Enemy spotted, MP3. Get a shot out, hit deer center mass. Still runs away. Decide to go look for it alone. I think to myself, I have a gun, I'll be fine. Been walked for about 20 minutes and found nothing. Fug.jpg. Heading back up to the point where the trail meets the field. Spoopy begins now. I see the head of a deer mounted on a stick at the trailhead. Instantly sprint the other direction. Fucking terrified. Almost to the point where the trail splits towards my house. Completely out of breath. Too freaked out to scream, can only make little noises. As I close on the fork in the trail, I see something. It has a human-shaped body, but long arms and no neck. Shoot that fucking creature in the head. At that point, I don't know if I missed or the slug did nothing. It was too dark to tell. Start slowly walking towards me. Fuck. Cut through the woods towards my house because deer heads are the other way. As I'm moving through the thick-ass woods, I can hear that thing following me. Drop the gun so I can run faster. Finally get in the house and get my brother and tell him everything. He says I just saw something and that I need to go back out and get my gun. Refuse to do it without him. Finally get him outside into the deer head. Still there. Brother takes my hand and runs straight to the house. Everyone else was gone, it was just us there. We both stayed awake all night talking about it. To this day, I don't know who or what did that to the deer, or what that other thing was. I'll tell you guys a story that was told to me by my grandfather. I can't tell you guys the exact year, but my grandfather implied that this story took place when he was a boy. So that would put this story in the late 40s or early 50s. My grandfather was born and lived in the rural parts of the Deep South. His great-uncle lived down the road from him. Back in those days, the family kind of lived all in the same general area and knew each other's business, and were involved in each other's work. At this time, my family were farmers and moonshiners. As such, they owned the only car in the area. And when I say they owned, I mean as a collective. All of the extended family, brothers and uncles, used that car. My grandfather and his extended family lived on a road that they owned basically both sides of the road for what seemed like a couple miles, meaning that my grandfather and his family would live in one house, surrounded by their fields and woods. Go in one divided by 1/8 of a mile down the road, and my great-great-grandfather would live there surrounded by his property. Go another several hundred yards down the road, and one of my grandfather's aunt and uncle would live there. Etc. This would go on for a couple miles. I say all this to explain that their road was infrequently traveled by car. As my grandfather's family owned the only car in the area, and his extended family was practically the only family down that road for miles. If there was nothing to do, either on the farm or in moonshining, my grandfather's great-uncle would sometimes walk about 5 to 10-ish miles down the road to the nearest busy road for cars. He would just loiter around the intersection at the regional church and wait for cars to pass by, to talk to the people in the cars. At this time, you would maybe get a car an hour. On a busy day. On to the main story. One day, at dusk, my grandfather's great-uncle had to use the bathroom. There was no indoor plumbing, so he had to go to the outhouse down by the edge of the woods. As he was making his way down the path, and since it was nearly dark out, he noticed a light traveling through the woods. He said that the light was moving towards him, kind of bobbing as it made its way through the woods. Though the motion of the light would have resembled a person walking through the woods holding a lantern, he knew that it wasn't the case. The light was blue, and it didn't light up the surrounding area. It was just a light unto itself. This strange sight scared him, so he froze in place, not too far from the outhouse at the edge of the woods, his eyes transfixed on the light. He said that the light came out into the open. The light, almost a foot in diameter, started to bob more violently. It almost resembles a bouncing ball, though not ever touching the ground, just a violent bobbing. He said that he knew, somehow, that he was going to die soon. He didn't know how or the day, but that he would die in the very near future. I don't know how he knew, just that it was a bad omen. He told his family of the light that he saw, and that it was a bad omen, foretelling his death. He also said that he was in fear for his soul, and that he was sure he would go to hell if he died. The very next Sunday, he went to the regional church that I mentioned was about 5 to 10 miles from his house. He confessed his sins and was baptized that day. The Sunday after he was baptized, about a week and a half after the sighting of the light, he was walking home from the intersection. He had spent that Saturday, as he had many lazy Saturdays, hanging out at the intersection and talking to passers-by. Later that afternoon, he decided to return home. He was making his way down the winding road that my family lived on, and he was run over by a car in a curve in the road. As nobody came to the door of any of his relatives, his killers were never caught. His body was found by my family when they went out searching for him, when he didn't return home that evening. TLDR. Grandfather's great-uncle sees a blue light at the edge of a field. Near dusk. Blue light is a bad omen. Grandfather's great uncle knows he will die soon. Goes to church to get right with God. Run over by a car. The very next Saturday. This isn't an orb that shows up in photographs. It was an orb of blue light seen by the naked eye. What was this orb? Is anyone else familiar with similar activities? Omens, unnatural light, etc.
Mississippi Anon, planning to move to a new town. A few months before moving, I started having weird dreams. First dream was about an old house that once belonged to an awful witch. Second dream is harder to recall, but it was about a cemetery. Moving day arrives and I explore town. Witch house from dream was a real location in this town. Weird, but sometimes I have dreams about places I eventually visit. No big deal. Pass a cemetery. Overwhelming feeling of needing to be on that land immediately. Do my best to ignore emotion and go home. Cemetery is on my mind all day, every day. This was the cemetery from my dream. It's as if the land is begging me to go. Not today, demons. Avoid driving on any roads that go near the cemetery for months. Close friend of the paranormal occult New Age comes to visit. Talk about dreams.
Let's go visit Anon. It'll be fun to see all the old headstones and pay respect.
Someone else will be with me, so okay, I guess. We park at the cemetery. Feelings kick up like crazy. Start to feel this pull on me, like someone pulling an object on a string. I started to hear this voice in my head.
Come find me.
Shitting bricks, but oblige. There's a deep, heavy sadness as I get closer to my destination. I can't even describe it to you. It's so beyond any feeling of dread, loss, pain. It was almost unbearable. Arrive at the topmost point of the cemetery, where a huge tree lies. A headstone that resembles a frog on a log is at the base of the tree. My body starts to break down and I start to bawl like a fucking baby. Managed to ask a friend to read the headstone. Too old to really see, but it appears to have been a young boy's stone. Can't bear this pain, have to leave. It's been years after this happened and I still feel that pull to return to that damn cemetery.
I live in the deep south in the middle of the woods basically. Grandfather, who died almost 2 years ago, has Native American ancestry and family land is basically all old Native American hunting grounds or some shit. He used to tell me stories about when he was a kid and how all the old people used to literally board up all the windows and doors every full moon. Years later, I'm tracking the deer probably about a mile from my grandfather's house. Have a tree stand in one of the trees and go there to decide to stay there until I see some deer. Don't see a single deer or animal the entire time up there. It's starting to get dark and just remember I didn't bring a flashlight so I know I won't make it back to the house before it gets dark. Decide to stay the night in the fucking tree stand. Fall asleep for a few hours I think and start to hear shit crashing through the woods. Fully awake and it's pitch black out except for a full moon. Don't think anything about it at first, just thinking it's a family of deer running through the woods or a buck scratching trees with its antlers. The sound gets closer and closer and sounds louder than I thought it was. Sounds like a fucking truck driving through the woods. Sounds start coming from all different directions. Getting really scared now. Suddenly it sounds like something is trying to climb the fucking tree my stand is up. Feel the tree jerking around like it's about to fall. I want to get down and run for it and take my chances. The metal ladder at the bottom of the tree stand is broken off and since I can't see shit good I'd probably break my ankle trying to jump it. Load my shotgun up with game shot slugs and start firing at the ground. Hit something that sounds like a huge bear. We don't have bears in this area. It cries like a dog and runs away. Other noises follow it. Finally, the sun comes up hours later without another incident. Have to jump down and hike it home paranoid as a squirrel. Make it home scared shitless.
Some things I grew up with in the deep south. One grannies, my great-grandmother was the granny for our general area. Meaning she was essentially a midwife and was consulted on everything from how to cure croup to love affairs to how to care for the dead. She was supposed to be able to charm warts with a green stick that had the bark shaved off, which she would rub on the wart and bury under the porch. General knowledge holds that you don't upset a granny, both for practical reasons. She likely knows most of your family and supernatural reasons. Basically, they're sort of witch, seer, healers that you don't want to get on their bad side. To the hoop snake was a species of long, extremely poisonous snake that would actively chase after people. To catch fast-moving prey, it would bite its tail and form a hoop that would roll along the ground after the person, prey. My grandfather said his grandfather had seen one and that it had bit a tree instead of the man it was chasing, and the tree died. 3 black cats, in my area particularly. There are legends of large black mountain lion-like cats that live in the area. They're supposed to be pseudo-supernatural, in that they're unusually large and almost impossible to see unless they're attacking. For the bagman, I don't know how widespread this is, but in my area we also have tales about bagmen. Basically, an old man that would walk along the road at night and catch any children and stuff them in a sack. Never to be heard from again. It's never said exactly what happens to the kids, but something terrible, I'm sure. 5 black dog. I think this is a holdover from the European legends of black dogs, but there are stories about black hound dogs that follow people and bring either bad or good luck depending on the story. It's supposed to be especially bad luck if you encounter one when you're hunting.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.